Hi, all. In this session, we will try to first understand how a web page is laid out. We will be using Udemy's homepage as an example, and we will start by first inspecting the page. This is the same Chrome debugging tool that I mentioned previously, but this time we will not be using it for network inspection. We'll be looking at the URL elements. So a web page is laid out initially just to display text. But as we went further and further along this utilization of spatial cues and having fancier layouts, the layout engine became more involved. We used to have things like just top down and just text flowing, and now we have something that is a mixture of top down, left to bottom, and everything in between. In Momen, we use a layout engine called Flex. Flex covers all the basics of all the other layout engines in the browser, which are like, I think Flow is one, the other one is Grid. We don't have to get into this because in Momen, you will only be using Flex. And the idea of Flex is that everything is a box either from left to right or top to bottom. So if you look at the top bar here, which you might have ignored, this is a box. You can see this whole thing. In fact, the entire page is a box, but it's a page. The page box goes from top to bottom. If you look at the dotted lines, the really fine dotted lines, you can see there's a top section which is our top bar there, which says Udemy and login, and we have a section in right below that, which is this yellowish background that says learn to earn more money. That one is typically called the hero section for some reason. And yeah, which is this guy over here. This is this hero section. And then you got this one down here, which makes up the main section, which contains the categories and the list of courses that you have access to. Now, if we look at the top one, it is laid out from left to right. And in fact, the leftmost thing is the Udemy icon, and the rightmost thing is your login button. Obviously, the login button is going to be conditional because it's the behavior of it depends on whether you're logged in. So this is actually the simplest layout of the entire thing. The next section is now more involved. It itself is a left to right one because you've noticed that dotted vertical line. That means you're laid out from left to right. But on the left portion of it, you can see it's actually top down because once we expand that, that's a top down one, and you can notice the dotted line as well there. So, and to the right, it doesn't really matter because it's just a single image. It will look almost the same whether you lay it out from left to right or top to bottom. So that point becomes moot. Same thing if we go down here. Let's scroll down. The bottom portion is actually left to right because you can notice the dotted vertical line. That means it's left to right. And within the left portion of that, you got a top down. So the top part of that is the category list, and the bottom part of that is the course list. Now, if we further expand on that, if we look at this guy over here, this is actually a left to right layout as the dotted lines are vertical. And then if we go down to here, a left to, this is actually a list. So it will go as far as needed to the right, and then it will wrap to the second row. But within each of the list items, in this case, it represents the actual course content. You can see that it is obviously top down, right? So it's a top down. If we look at that, the dotted lines is vertical. So that means it's top down. And the top one is obviously an image, and the bottom, you actually got two things. You have, well, actually, it's not too bad. It's a single thing. You got the title, and then you have the price, but it's top down. And this portion of it is a top down, which the top part is just the title of my courses, and the bottom part is an icon and a button. So that is all there is. So layout really is just trying to find out whether that thing is left to right, top down, or top to bottom. And then you have to combine different groupings of elements to achieve the desired effect. There are a lot of things that, a lot of details that we might have to pay attention to in order to achieve effects. You can see once we adjust the widths, things would leave empty spaces to the left and right, all that stuff. But all this will be just details. I'll teach you each one of them. In this session, we'll try to start implementing Udemy. A little bit of logistics. By the end of this session, we will be at a particular point in implementation, and that will be provided as like a save point in this course. So to start the next session, you could either continue with what you have implemented, or you could start with that particular link, like a save point in a game. Okay, so as we said, the top bar is made up of this large thing at the top. This is the top bar, and within it, you got another view. So it keeps maximum width of the top bar, and that's what we're going to implement. All right. So first of all, we'll create a new project. We'll call it Udemy-0 because that's the first one. Once I do a tab, this thing automatically selects online education. That's because we have a little bit of AI going on there. We'll go into AI later. First of all, the top bar, that is a view. Any kind of transparent or layout specific thing in Momen, that's just a view. Right, so we'll put that in. You could also double click, that works as well, but we'll undo that by pressing Control Z or Command Z if you're using Mac. Another way you can do it is by pressing F, because you can see there's a F in there, and then that kind of draws the actual size of the view. This thing extends the entire width of the screen. So that means we'll set this to 100% of the width, and its height is actually fixed, and it's actually 68. So we'll just make that 68. So we're somewhat similar to this now, but it's more to do. All right, so this thing has a little bar at the bottom of it. That's a border, right? So let's give it a border. We have a border at the bottom. So make these 0 and 0 and 1. Color of this, let's give it a theme, right? So it's actually just E4, E4, E7, but that is little bit difficult to remember. Also, we want to be able to reuse that, so let's just add a theme on it. Let's give it a new thing. We call it E4, E4, E7. You could also select that based on the color picker. And then let's rename it to shade, or like a gray shade or something. And in here, let's make that the border. Let's pick that here, the gray shade. All right. And we don't want it to have any background because it's just transparent stuff. So we got rid of the background color. That's mostly good enough, but let's open up the mirror. If you look at this, that achieves most of this effect, but it's not good enough. Why not? So imagine if we had another view that's like super, super long. Make it super long so it exceeds the length of the screen. And you can see it here in the mirror because mirror automatic updates. And if you scroll down, you can see that the bar disappears. And if we do that in the finished result, it doesn't, right? So what is the difference? That comes down to layout positioning. So you could either do relative, absolute, or fixed. Relative is basically it's relative to its parent in this case being the window. Absolute is again related to its parent, but with absolute you can choose pixel values. In this case, we're going to be using fixed. Fixed is going to be relative to the viewport. What the viewport is what we see in the window. So all the way from here down to here, that's a viewport. And once I have the position type to fixed, this thing actually no longer will be scrollable. So in order to show that this works, I am going to add a text, and I'm gonna have it like really, really, really long. I'll have it multiple lines with no row limit. Paste in a lot of things. All right, that's long enough. So once we go to here, you can see this is scrollable, but the top bar does not move, and that's the effect we want to achieve. Okay, we'll get rid of that. Now, the second effect we're gonna have is this bar inside, this little thing inside. You can see there's this, and that is to keep the maximum width of the top bar so that it does not always take up the entirety of the screen because it looks bad. All right, so what we'll do is just to put another view inside of this view. So making sure that we actually have this view instead of that. So let's give it a name. We call it the top bar. And then this one's like inner top bar. And we'll make this as tall as its parent, and the width will be as wide as its parent, but with a caveat that it does not exceed 1280. This is just an arbitrary number. So now you see this, this is almost the effect that we have with Udemy, the actual website. The difference is that at the end of this, there's still a little bit of spacing so that it does not take up the entire thing. And let's do that as well. In fact, the way we achieve that is by having paddings inside the inner view. So a padding is the space that cannot be taken up by its children, and the counterpart of that is a margin. The margin is the space that cannot be taken up by its siblings. Okay, so a couple ways of achieving this, and that's going to be very common in this course. So one way is you're going to add a padding on its parent, and we'll add a padding of 10. And once you added the padding of 10, you are going to see the effect here. And as we scroll it narrower, you can see that little padding on the side. So that's one of the simpler ways of doing this. The other way you can do it is by not changing anything in its parent, but we will be adding padding to itself. So the way we do that is just by removing the padding here. Just remove all the padding, and inside we'll add some padding of 10, and then we'll add the image, which is Udemy, right? And that's where we go in here. And on the other side, it will actually be a conditional view. I'll explain what conditional views later, but it's just a view except like it takes different conditions. So we'll add the conditional view. And one thing you can do is just by searching for a conditional, right? So I added that. Now this thing is laid top to bottom. And what we want is from left to right, and then we'll just change it here. And also we want it to be sticking to the two sides of this component, and you can change the spacing to space between. And the image, let's just change that to a fixed size, because like the actual image is fixed. So I will be uploading the actual Udemy image, and that is in, so that's this, and we'll make it as wide as it needs. Well, it's actually just 108 and 35, and then this automatically scales down to that thing, and it's going to be automatically centered because we did choose space between, and the thing is like in the middle. You could make it top aligned, but we're gonna have it center aligned. Okay, so this is the easy part, and you can see there's always space between the end, the left end of the image and the starting point of that bar, and that is what we have in here. And you can observe that gap. Okay, and on the other side, we have this conditional view. And the way we're gonna deal with the conditional view is We'll have a few cases because it's going to appear different when depending on whether you're logged in. So, so let's change that to not logged in, and we'll add another case for logged in. Okay. Oh, I just added another case by mistake. Getting rid of that. We won't be configuring the logics yet. We'll just have the size of it. Okay, so this entire conditional view is going to be as wide as it needs to be because, as you can see, the login thing is a particular width, but if you change the, if I now try to log in, it takes up a larger chunk of the screen. And that is what we're going to do. We're going to do fit. And for the height, we'll keep it 100%. So it takes up the entirety of its parent. And in this case, it's going to be laid out left to right because you have logout and the username, right? So that's laid out from left to right. It doesn't really matter how we do spacing in here because you only have two things. So let's do the logged in first. We have to change that width as well, make that fit. And height is also going to be 100%. All right. And for this one, the layout really doesn't matter, but we do want things to be centered, right? We have a button, which is a B. So you could do a B and then just put it in here. The buttons for some reason has gone to 0, but let's make the button look normal. So we'll do, let's do 100 pixels. Looks good enough. Okay, that's good enough. And for the height, we'll also have it fixed just for 34. Just make it look nicer. We call it the login. And we have a color. So in terms of that color, the background color is this 1598 thing. Now, let's change that. We'll add another custom theme color. We call it the black thing, right? So we call it black-ish. And the color of that is actually 1B. And okay, so now let's do this guy. If you, it will show up, but it takes a while for the tooltip to show up. It's blackish. Actually, let's just delete all the default ones. That's not very important. Get rid of that. Okay. And primary, I'll delete that as well. And what else? Let's change the font to this particular one, and we don't need to change much else. That's good enough. Okay, so that becomes login. And remember, we had another case that we had to configure, which is the not logged in part. So for not logged in, we're going to add the, I got the other way around. Let's just change the name. We'll call it logged in. And the other guy, we call it not logged in. Not logged in. And you can see I'm currently selecting the button, but I do want to select its parent, which is a conditional view. You could either click this thing, or you can do command click on the login button, or you could do shift enter. That also gives you its parent. You can keep doing that, and eventually you end up on the actual page. Right, so we'll do that, and we're in not logged in. Let's go to logged in. It currently is empty. Okay, for the logged in part, we will add the text first. And the text will be, let's first make it 100%. And then we'll call it logout. And this will go become fit. And then we'll add another thing, which is the username. So we call this logout. And then the button is login. This is your, let's call it login, logout. And the image is Udemy icon, Udemy logo. It's quite important that you do change all these names so you can find things. Otherwise, it's all going to be called text and whatever. So once you're logged in, we'll add another thing called, before we do that, we'll make it thicker, right? So this is what it looks like. And let's change the font. Let's make it also plus Jakarta Sans. Make it medium, which makes it thicker. And line height, you can change to 20. It doesn't really matter because the log out itself is, it wouldn't take up more than 20. It doesn't really matter. So in terms of color, instead of using that normal black, we'll be using the same black that we used for the buttons background color. It's for aesthetic purposes, it's quite important that you don't use too many colors in the same website. It becomes very busy, it's difficult to understand things, and distracts from the information you're trying to convey. All right, so in here, we'll add another thing, T inside here. Sometimes it's difficult because your child component fully covers the parents, so at that point, it's difficult to add in new things. And in this case, just double click and you get a new element in here. Let's also do this, and instead of hello world, we will be binding data this time. This time will be your logged in user's username. So now I've changed the color, and we also have to change spacing because this doesn't look nice, right? So we will change this to the same font class, same line height, and also medium. And the color here is this bluish theme color, and let's just add that one to theme as well. Let's call it blue. The actual color is 1598 FF, and now let's change the color to that. Okay, so now you see that they're stuck together. How do we make sure that they are separated? Well, you just add a gap to its parent. And in this case, the gap, let's make it 12, and that's wide enough. Let's go to the mirror and take a look at this. And that seems good enough. And also, how can we see this? You can drag these things. You can drag this up. So that becomes a default, and this is what you see. You only see logout and nothing else. The reason is we haven't logged in yet, so we have nothing to show, right? So the default is going to be not logged in. And the last thing we need to do to complete the top bar is to get rid of the background color and get rid of that in here as well, in here as well. So we don't want any background color. And now you have the same looking thing here. Once we log out, you can see you have the same. The top bar now looks more or less identical. I think I have a little bit of difference in here, but now also, I think that's to do with the actual image that I picked. But once you drag it in, you can see that there's the appropriate gaps and everything. And that's it for now.